So, SHOT Show 2024 has come to a close, and the industry's annual ego measuring contest has finally wrapped up for the beginning of the year. And while that introduction may come across as a bit crass, it's actually intended to plant in your mind the idea of what SHOT Show has been for a long time for many people in this industry as well in this culture. SHOT Show is an experience, it's an annual event where the idea of industry professionals all gather together in Las Vegas and in between extremely late nights having conversations in areas well too loud to have them. The manufacturers, influencers, individuals, artists, comedians, comics, distributors, retailers, and whatsoever, even military industrial complex to another extent, all gather together to show off some of the new things that they have come out with or will be coming out with in the following year, and also to try to make relationships and deals and so on and so forth. Now, for myself, this has been my fourth time attending SHOT Show, and it's important to communicate just how much it has changed in the last near decade. The SHOT Show of 2024 is not your daddy's SHOT Show, and that's going to be taken out of context. So, if this is your first time joining us for the Redacted Culture Cast, if this is your first time listening, welcome aboard. We are going to talk a little bit about culture. We're going to talk a bit about community building. We're going to talk about the state of things and where they're going, or where I believe that they should go. What are my credentials? What are my bona fides? Well, I was at SHOT Show, so I guess neener, but I don't think that's going to be all that good of an argument going forward. But let me explain. Oh, yeah, and if you want to support the show and if you want to help us out, remember we do have some items still available on the shop. What is there is there. We are getting ready for the next month's release. I am working through trying to tighten up the not farm to table process that goes into the kind of gear that we can get for you. I've got a product coming out this year that I'm looking forward to. I believe it's going to be somewhat revolutionary, maybe even get to be considered innovative, but we'll get to that in a minute. And we have other ways to jump on if you want to be a part of the conversation. If you've got questions to ask, if you want to contribute, you can always head over to redactedculture.locals.com. And that is going to be a little bit of the behind the scenes, a little bit of the first looks, a little bit of tactics and techniques, a little bit of philosophy, and a lot of it on talking about how we think about what is right and true and good. So, on to the show. Advert aside. SHOT Show 2024 marked a distinct difference in what the show has been about for as long as I have been around. My first time at SHOT Show was in 2015, and that was the year of entourages, the war sport LVOA, and the earliest, faintest vision of night vision becoming the new clout tool. But what was easily observed this year, particularly for SHOT Show 2024, is so much of that has changed. Not only has the demographic changed considerably, with millennials far outnumbering what you might want to semi-derogatorily refer to as the gray hairs, which I wouldn't do because I'm actually graying and I don't want you to get at my emotions about it. But like our generation, if I refer to our generation as the millennials, are certainly the majority demographic, and it's shown in the culture, it's shown in the community, and it's shown in the kind of events that we're starting to see and how they play out. But another thing and something that's important to note is that as I traveled around talking to different people that I had known or getting to meet new people, whether I was visiting a booth or having a conversation at Circle Bar or other places, one thing that was consistent, and I want to make sure that you know ahead of time, is that 2023 was a hard year for all of us. It was a hard year either because we felt it in the pocketbook, or we felt it because in order to keep the numbers at where they needed to be, individuals needed to work twice as hard, be gone twice as long, and miss out on twice as many of their family's milestone events. One of the reasons why people tend to leave the military is because they want to be around their family more. But if that translates to when they leave the military and they have to deal with a little bit of that aimlessness and they end up in an industry like the firearms industry, only to find that they're going to be gone nearly as much, just broken up over the year, that is a testament to values that we might want to reconsider, values that are being depicted in the way that people are approaching the culture, however. And the solution is not exactly brought about by the top down, but by the bottom up. We are seeing decentralization both take place in our community level, but also in the kinds of equipment that I saw plenty of interest in. And so 2023 was a hard year for all of us, and you are not alone in that. If you think that you're sitting at home and you're saying that you're not up to snuff because of whether it's imposter syndrome or the finances are difficult or everyone's kind of distant at a time, I want to make sure that you understand that you are not alone in that aspect. It's that for many of us here in this industry, in this community, and in this culture, not only was 2023 a difficult year externally, perhaps because of the very oppressive and steady march of aggressive political moves made against what we believe to be right and true and good, but also because those economic impacts, whether as the result of the Brace ruling or other identifying factors, um, cost of expenses, having companies having to lay off people, and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, it was not uncommon to hear that somebody was down 20 to 30 to 40% from their years prior. Now, many of these industries, or not industries, some of these companies did start during kind of the peak of COVID, where they got to ride a little bit of a high. And I'm not saying that they're going to go away. I'm saying that for many of us, it doesn't matter whether you've been around for 10 years or 5 years or 15, 2023 was a tough year. And I think we can acknowledge that and move on. But 2023 also, or I'm sorry, 2024 now, going into SHOT Show this year, was a marked difference from my earliest experiences at going to SHOT Show. And before you wrap it up into, well, that's just your subjective approach, here are some notable differences. I only saw two entourages at SHOT Show this year. And well, actually, no, I only saw one and heard of two, to be clear. And they were Terran Tactical and the Liver King. I never met the Liver King. I never encountered him. I still think he's a bit of a myth. He might be CGI generated for all I care. But I would hear this going around as I made my rounds to the different people that I wanted to talk to, many of them that have been on the show, some of them I hope to have on the show in the future. And there was a distinct difference from when I first went to SHOT Show. It was not uncommon in 2015 to go to a booth where a sort of celebrity of sorts was going to make an appearance and there to be hundreds of people gaggled around waiting to shake his hand and get their 3.5 seconds of, hey, I like what you're doing, which is legitimate, not to be too negative on it. But this year, even when there was a, let's just call it in loose terms, celebrity appearance, the list of people waiting in line to meet them rarely exceeded 15 people, maybe 20 here and there. And so, while that may sound small specifically, I distinctly remember in 2015 there being occasionally swarms of 100 or more people kind of following a person around or meeting at a booth waiting to get to see him, myself included. We've all grown up. So the lack of entourages, though, and the lack of what you might colloquially refer to as dick measuring, is a very welcome change. I know now it might be a little bit on how I present myself. It might be the demographic shift. Perhaps it's the fact that SHOT Show is a little bit less on badge checking, whether or not you're cool enough to participate, although that certainly can happen from time to time. It seems to be a little bit more focused on people and relationships, which is what we want and what we'll get onto in the next or we'll get onto in a little bit. The millennial demographic as the dominant demographic has grown up with the kind of boomer stratosphere of maybe the FUD boomer stratosphere where, celebrities like special operations veterans were put on pedestals and they were supposed to be the heroes and everyone got to follow around. That's kind of disseminated. You might say that the age of the SOF is over and the age of the National Guard is upon us. And so, what I mean by that is that there is a lot more or interconnectivity between different peoples, though there are certainly those that find themselves on the outside. Now, the center part of this wrap up of SHOT Show 2024, and you can recognize that I'm not talking as much about gear or notable things that I saw there. And to be very clear, I didn't see a lot. I wasn't looking around going from optic to optic, scope to scope, gun to gun, machine gun to machine gun, looking at all the different booths and all everyone else's new stuff entirely. Though there were some things that I noticed, it came about in the way that what I observed came about in the way that people talked about other people's participation. For example, persistent systems, I think colloquially referred to as wave relay. It's probably a social media thing. Um, Persistent Systems has their MPU-5 radios, which are a sort of ad hoc mesh network component. Please don't at me at this yet. I'm kind of trying to wrap my philosopher brain around wiring and technology, and it's working on its way. But that was kind of the new hotness in a sense. If being peak clout chasing gear brand in 2019 was a PVS 31 Alpha, or maybe 2021, which is the dual night vision, or a quad tube kind of thing. If that was peak 2021 or 2020, in 2024, the chatter about it was like an MPU-5, which is this radio distinctly with three different antennas. I wish I could have found a jammer. I didn't look very hard, but I want to get one. I think is that against the rules? Does the FCA does somebody ban that? I'm sure somebody bans that. It's cool. It must be illegal. So the point in this one is that um, you would I encountered this in a conversation a couple of times, most notably near kind of the end of SHOT Show, where you would find oftentimes something on social media going around that has to do with another dude posting with nods in an MPU-5, and the tragedy of it struck in a very peak PIQUE or whatever in stochastic method, and that's not the right word, but it was that there seemed to be a certain class of person that can't be happy for anybody else. And it's if it's the attitude that, oh well, special operations isn't that cool, I because they won't let me in the club, or whether it's something else, like the constant criticism that never ends about clout chasing and name dropping and whatever. It's I've come to realize a little bit more clearly this year is that person who builds his identity on negatively, or you almost like a weird 1990s version of negging, which I discovered way late in life because I was homeschooled. But it's like you're trying to get attention by just complaining about everybody else's everything. And I can certainly admit to some criticism there. Some self-reflection is of note. But this kind of, maybe not persona, but there's a certain class or type of person that um, uh, tends to spike up in relevance during SHOT Show, and all they bring to the table is complaints. And I've come to realize rather clearly that those people are irrelevant. Their opinions are worth ignoring, and the mute button on social media is probably what they deserve. Because if the only thing that you contribute to this community is pissing on somebody else's achievements, then I don't really care. I don't really want to be around you anymore. And the nice thing is, to my recollection, I can't think of anybody I know specifically who dominates that persona, or supremely fits it. But I've certainly encountered it, particularly in social media. or in the way that we communicate online. And so the strata that I'm trying to talk about is you kind of have an above and a below strata. And those above are they're getting to know one another. They might be community building, they might be developing something for operations or working together on equipment and tech and gear and so on and so forth. Or maybe they're starting a business and they're trying to grow that business and that business has been successful. And then as a result, they purchase something or they acquire something that is respectable or it's a desirable item. Whether it's DEFCON shoes, a PVS 31 Alpha, an MPU 5, whatever. You can tell that I'm kind of getting over the upper respiratory disease, also the shot flu or whatever it's called. Uh, and so this kind of persona, this attitude, this split, um, is something worth identifying in the sense that some people are acting and participating in the community, and some people's only participation is this negativity that no one's achievement can be legitimate. No quote unquote influencer is honest. No brand has integrity. No, not, and it's this cynicism that just crushes people. And if you're surrounding yourself with those people, I recommend you get out and quickly because they will destroy you. And there's a certain excuse that gets brought up very often by this kind of person is that they're just holding people accountable. And this is an important lesson that my wife has helped me understand because she's said it before. She My wife was cool before I thought it was cool. How do you phrase that in a way that doesn't make this open source? Uh but the you can't hold people accountable that you don't know. So on the one hand, it's why is it that so many people in our culture and our community cannot be happy for somebody else's success? You are robbing yourself of happiness and joy and participation in community if the only thing that you can do is be jealous and envious and angry of other people. You might as well call yourself a communist at this point because that's basically your worldview. And I want to challenge us all, myself included, to look at the achievements of other people. And some of them, there is some discernment. Be careful here that don't go so far as to say that everything that you see on the internet is real. But we know that social media is social media. And I'll use this example before I move on. If I'm going to go on if I'm in a situation where I have to do your cinematic 80s movie hero, we're putting a team together to do the thing. I'm not going to necessarily look at the pictures that you have on social media in the way I'm not going to look at your social media trying to find out if you have the right gear entirely. I'm not. I'm really going to look for like OPSEC kind of stuff. Like, does this guy have a loud mouth? Does he talk too much? Um, does he interact with integrity? I'm not going to look at your social media if I'm doing the metaphorical 1980s putting a team together to go save the world. I'm not going to go, oh, this guy has a picture with him with an MPU 5. He must be the guy. I might ask him if he's experienced with it and I need to learn more about the kit or whatever, but I'm not going to be looking at somebody standing next to a pool holding a cool piece of equipment and think, that qualifies him as cool guy status. I'm going to think, oh, that guy's achieved something if he can afford to have one of those because they're expensive. Or he's working in a capacity that I would hope to find out that he maybe he can teach me something about it. And so we we can't really, for some reason, we can't seem to be happy for one another. Or no, there's this attitude of there's a persona, an attitude that I see arriving, popping up from time to time of somebody who just cannot cannot stomach the success of other people's. If you want to go to simplicity, rising tides lift all ships. Look out for your homies, celebrate their successes. There's so many ways that this has come about, and if it has to reach live, laugh, love levels, it sure beats being a negative little sour puss all the time. I wonder if YouTube's going to censor that. We'll figure it out. But the excuse that's so often brought is that we're holding each other accountable. Now, here's the trick. You cannot hold people accountable if you don't know them. If let's use big name celebrities right here. I don't personally know Lucas Bodkin very well. I've met him. I've shaked his hand before. There's probably been 4 words said between the two of us. So if he says something on social media that I think is out of line, not just like silly, but out of line, if I really want to hold him accountable, which the purveying that the underlying component of holding somebody accountable is that you actually care about them, their well-being, their character, their integrity, I have to have a relationship with them. If I don't know you, I can't hold you accountable. If you don't know me, you can't really hold me accountable because it doesn't work that way. There's no skin in the game, there's no stake, there's no rapport, relationship, or development. And while there are kind of ways where this plays out there's ways where you might say there are exemptions. For example, I don't have to know you to tell you not to be a pedophile, or I don't have to know you and have a personal relationship with you to call you out for doing a stolen valor. If that information is available, then that is an exemption to the relationship equals accountability rule, or the prerequisite of relationship for accountability requirement. There are other examples where if I invite something from, say, a conversation or a community, in some ways how we interact on this podcast, then that might be another exemption. But if that guy over there says something and then I just nuke him from orbit for no reason, not for no reason to, sorry, for the purposes of holding him accountable, the chances are I don't care about his well being and it will do more harm than good. The solution to this problem is relationship building, which is convenient and important for what 2024 is going to look like and what 2024 looks like as a community, culture, and industry, and for us as men, particularly men of the West, if you want to do a Lord of the Rings kind of reference. Sorry, nose is still cruddy. So the solution, the antidote is relationship. If I have a relationship with you, then I can hold you accountable. And in addition to having a relationship with other people, which sounds so kind of surface level in its own way, y- um, that also provides a robust defense against isolation, to some extent, suicide or depression. It also is the antidote to the kind of divide and conquer strategy that we might see in regime change and cultural influences. It also is an important subject for us out here because, like I said at the beginning, 2023 was a hard year for a lot of us, and relationship building is what we are doing in our industry and our culture. And while I think we oftentimes do take it for granted, in the times of my life where I've sat down and tried to be much more deliberate about relationship building, it has only netted benefits. The relationships that I have are more sincere, and the relationships that I have developed at that times are able to become genuine relationships. Don't be afraid of having a friend that you can trust in. It might take work and time, but do it and be deliberate about it because your friends, your relationships will respect you a whole lot more if you're deliberate about it. Now, you might make some awkward advances and some weird joke. Don't turn this into a 1990s coming of age story, but rather, I encourage you to be deliberate on that, which leads to the spirit of 2024. From 2020, I think 2020 was the year where if you didn't have a community, you found out really quickly. The beginning of 2020 for us, for myself, started with I was living in Minneapolis and the whole COVID thing was starting. And for a while, I noticed that people started paying attention to who their friends were because their close friends were people that they're willing to break curfew to go visit. But once the riots started in Minneapolis, people started paying attention to who their enemies were. And those were people who might out them like an informant in a very communistic sense. Your Gestapo, your insert any Eastern European evil. Um, That's when people started paying attention to who those were. Their enemies were people who were liabilities, who would sell them for a loaf of bread or identify them to the mob as whatever the mob hated so that they could revel in the fun of burning another family alive in their house. That's a little harsh, but it was going that way really quickly. And so in that year, 2020, I think what we're calling our culture really started looking at community building sort of as a circumstantial evidence and sort of as the next natural evolution. You got your kit, you got your gun, you started getting training, and now you wanted to do stuff with other people. And where we're at right now is the attitude and the language that I see permissive, not maybe not even permissive, but that permeates our culture and our community is something like this. We need to do this. We need to get together. We need to organize. We need to plan. We need to spend time with one another. We need to do all of this. We, the community, the community, the community. And what I want to encourage you to do this year in 2024 is to change that language in your head from we need to do this to here I am, send me. And that looks like volunteering in some cases. And it looks like stepping up in that choice to build a relationship with somebody else, and that choice to volunteer in your church, and that choice as part of your church's leadership to deliberately respect the men who participate in your community voluntarily and give them something for their voluntary participation, whether that's training or whether it's training or organizing or respect or something of that kind, because we're certainly going to see more. I don't think this is a far out prediction that we're going to probably see a couple of church shootings this year. I don't think that's much of a stretch. As the animosity grows, our enemies grow bolder and more willing to engage in violence against the things that we consider good because they hate what is good because it is good. And so this SHOT Show wrap up began with how within my observation of the industry or the culture from SHOT Show, there's a lot less of that ego measuring fight that goes on, and it's visible because there were basically no entourages. I didn't see much of it. I didn't encounter much of it. And now our demographic, the millennials, are kind of the majority demographic in this culture, in this industry. And while there are still people who will make it their identity to hold people accountable by just negatively throwing trash into the chat or whatever, those people are beneath the board. They're not participants, and they should probably be ignored. So if your only contribution is complaining, don't want you around. But instead of trying to focus on holding each other accountable, we build relationships. And that is where I want to conclude with, here I am, send me. If that is our attitude going into this year, how can I make my friends' lives better? It will be better for all of us. So if you want to support us, that's a weird segue, but if you want to support the show, you can head over to redactedllc.com, and we'll talk to you soon. And we will, how does it go? Oh yeah, go forth and conquer.